Hollywood, a capital of the movie industry. Hollywood's dominance has been for almost a century and was located on the east coast of the United States. And during that time, they were making films with the kinetograph. This kinetograph was the first camera they made for movies. And the person that created this was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison at the time had a record of 1,093 patents. He had so many patents that informed to the Motion Picture Patent Company, also known as the MPPC. During that time, if you wanted to be in the movie business, you did so as the pleasure of Thomas Edison.
The independent producers eventually sued the Edison Trust, or Edison, and prevailed in the courts, and so therefore got their freedom to go and continue to use their movie-making equipment without having to pay license fees to him, because he went overboard in engaging thugs to collect his money.
Many film industries, independents, chose the option to flee, and so they did. They chose California because the judges were less friendly to the patent that Edison created. This was later known as the Patent War. What happens next? Well, let's discover the history on how the Hollywood studio system broke barriers in history. In 1853, Hollywood was established with a single adobe on the land of LA, California later on. But over the next 2 decades, the area became a big agricultural community called Cahuenga Island, where politician and real estate developer Harvey Henry Wilcox and his second wife Dahlia moved to LA from Topeka, Kansas in 1883. He purchased 150 acres of land west Hollywood and attempted to try his hand in ranching. His efforts didn't go well, however, so in 1887 he filed plans with the LA County Recorder's Office to subdivide the land. The first film that was completed in Hollywood was named The Count of Monte Cristo in 1908, although the production of the film was filmed in Chicago. By 1911, the first movie studio in the Nestor Company was set up on Sunset Boulevard. By 1915, many major motion picture companies had relocated to Hollywood from the East Coast. The Hollywood sign is a very famous attraction for people to visit, but it wasn't always like that. It was normally a billboard that advertised an upscale suburban home, which is now known as the Hollywood Hills. The billboard was originally in Hollywoodland and was later removed in 1923 by Los Angeles Times publisher and real estate developer Henry Chandler at the cost of $21,000. Each original letter was 30 feet wide and 40 feet tall. The sign, which was supposed to last a year and a half, however, it became part of Hollywood's culture and stayed how it was. During the Great Depression, the sign deteriorated and fixed in 1949, and the last 4 letters removed. In the late 1970s, the sign was restored again and has been featured in countless movies, including Superman, Mighty Joe Young, and The Day After Tomorrow. The golden age of Hollywood was a period of growth, experimentation, and change in the industry that brought thrilling Hollywood and its movie stars under all controlling studio system in the era. 5 movie studios known as the Big Five worked together. Warner Brothers, which branded itself as a working class, that they turned out low-budget dramas and created gangster movies. 20th Century Fox, which made its reputation thanks to its chief director. Paramount, which is known as the most European studio because they lured a lot of filmmakers from Germany and the UK. Universal Studios, which was made in April 30th, 1912, New York, New York. RKO, which was the home of extremely popular Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers musicals. MGM, which is known as the biggest studio in the 1930s. Columbia, which was released on January 10, 1924 in LA, California, and United Artists, which was released on February 5, 1919. The golden age of Hollywood began with the silent movie era. Dramatic films such as D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation and comedies such as The Kid, starring Charlie Chaplin, were popular nationwide. Chaplin, the Marx Brothers, and Tallulah Bankhead were adored everywhere. With the introduction of movies and sound, the Hollywood producers introduced Western, musicals, romantic dramas, horror films, and documentaries. Movie stars were even more idolized, and Hollywood increased its reputation as the land of fame. During World War I, after President Woodrow Wilson declares war on Germany, the Big Five jumped on the political bandwagon, often using pressure and guidance from the Wilson administration. They produced educational shorts and reels on the war preparedness and military recruitment. By the 1930s, at the height of Hollywood's golden age, the movie industry is one of the largest businesses in the United States. The Great Depression made Hollywood even bigger than it already was. People went to the theaters, were trying to get out of the terrible world they lived in, and went to theater to get entertainment by entertainment and forgot about the world that they lived in. It estimated up to 80 million Americans that went to the movies each week about during the Depression. Some of the greatest films made in all of Hollywood history were made in the late 1930s, such as Snow White, Seven Dwarfs, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Gone with the Wind, A Star is Born, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, and Wuthering Heights. As World War II came, people needed Hollywood more than anything, and Hollywood was got to help them. Studios in Hollywood made comedic scripts from the famous comedians during the time: Bud Abbott, Lou Costello, Bob Hope, and Jack Benny. The cartoons back then represented war propaganda in an entertaining and lighthearted way. During the time, documentaries brought the realities of war to life, leaving the audience shocked because they never saw anything like that before. But it wasn't easy for them to do something like that. They would have to live like soldiers for them to film. Filming, even from the military near sea, were also not banned. They were also banned from not to film at night because it was prohibited and dangerous. The Supreme Court banned block booking and ordered the studios to divest themselves of all theater holdings. This was the end of the Hollywood studio system. The ruling forced the Big Five to sell their movie theaters and become more careful about the films they produced. Studios were also required to respect the Hays Code. It's a voluntary set of rules for censorship in movies. It was not an issue in the 50s, but tied people's hands in the 60s. As television popularity expanded in the 50s, movie attendance suffered. Movie studios proved that they could easily snag some of the Hollywood glory with their franchises and movies, such as Zulu and Lawrence of Arabia. Finally, with the advent of tabloid magazines, many Hollywood stars were called out for unusual and questionable behavior, which affected their images and knocked them out of the lofty pedestals. During the Cold War, paranoia grew in Hollywood and the rest of the United States over communism. In 1947, HUAC decided to investigate communism files. At least 40 people in the movie industry were called to testify. 10 directors and screenwriters known as the Hollywood 10 chose to challenge the legitimacy of the HUAC's actions.
Either you completely cooperated with the committee, which meant saying yes or no to the question about whether you were a communist or ever had been, and if the answer was yes, as it was in my case, we knew the next question was who else was, and we certainly didn't want to go into that.
When they fought, their efforts backfired, fined, and eventually jailed.
People generally in Hollywood were pretty scared to have anything to do with us, whereas before we went to prison, they had not been nearly as scared, and there were plenty of undercover arrangements that were made to write scripts under pseudonyms for a good deal less money than you were accustomed to being paid. There were a couple of possible suicides as a result of it. There were a good deal of misery.
After the fiasco, the Hollywood 10, Ned Clean, Dimitrek, and anyone else in the industry suspected of supporting communism were blacklisted and denied work. Hundreds of actors, musicians, writers, producers, and directors made the ignominious list, including Lena Horne, Oscar Wilde, Charlie Chaplin, Lloyd Bridges, Burl Ives, and Anne Revere. On the other side, Hollywood has a bit of a dark side that lurks underneath, as Oscar Levant famously quotes, "Strip away the pony tinsels of Hollywood and you'll find the real tinsel underneath." Each year, the apparel fame attracts thousands of people with dreams to Hollywood with little chance of making it big. Many spend money on acting classes, agents, and headshots. When money runs out, they will be stars that will often become desperate, even homeless. Some turn to druggies, prostitutes, or be part of the porn industry. Drugs and alcohol have always been used rampant in Hollywood and is often blamed on the streets of fame and also on flow of money. Hundreds of celebrities have experienced drug or alcohol-related deaths, including Marilyn Monroe, Julie Garland, William Holden, Prince, Heath Ledger, and Whitney Houston. But Hollywood's biggest secret may be sexual abuse. Although sexual abuse existed since the dawn of movies, it reached a scandalous climax in 2017 when the New York Times broke the story that Mogg Harvey Weinstein has allegedly sexual abused actors and employees for decades. He was fired from his movie studio, and dozens of victims came forward to accuse him. Movie fans say that the 1960s to 70s as the second golden age of Hollywood, as the old studio system in the 1930s completely broke down and restrictions on sexual content, obesity, and violence. These changes give directors like Mark Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, Mike Nichols, Alfred Hitchcock, and other free reign over controversial content that definitely wasn't family friendly. Some of the films that caused chaos in the 1960s and 70s include Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, Psycho, The Godfather, Rocky, and Saturday Night Fever. During the 1970s and 80s, computer special effects has evolved and helped launch massive blockbuster action movies such as Jaws and Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchises. Feel-good movies like Rocky and E.T. send moviegoers flocking to theaters and make their favorite movie stars bigger than ever. Movie ticket sales declined in the 1990s, but Hollywood pressed on thanks to the surge in the VCR of movie rentals, and later DVDs and Blu-rays came out. Within the 2000s came an increase on Disney movies, big-budget blockbusters, and crude comedies. Changing technology continues to move people to a more digital world, and Hollywood has more tech than ever. Many Americans today are much less enthralled with Hollywood's movie stars and their glamorous lifestyles. In conclusion, Hollywood will keep upgrading its technology and continue to expand on how they do business, which will keep the audience engaged and entertained worldwide. In the end, we all know that Hollywood is going nowhere.